Hello, and welcome to another edition of Your Therapist Needs Therapy, the podcast where two mental health professionals talk about their mental health journeys and how they navigate mental wellness while working in the mental health field. I didn't want to have to talk about the Bible today. Just, personal preference. Spent 30 years talking about the Bible. This is an evangelical. It's not my favorite topic. But religious trauma is one of my specialties, and we had a couple of recent, very public appearances made by the good book, as it were, by people who very clearly didn't read it and only are pulling it out because they're in a bit of trouble. And so we're going to look at why pederasts keep using the Bible as cover. And we're not even talking about the Catholic Church. Ayo. We are talking about Donald Trump, who publicly in prime time, I think. I don't watch regular television. I don't know anyone who does. Boomers, I guess. That's probably why I did it. It's in prime time, read the Bible from the Oval Office after posting an AI image of him as Jesus, in which he thought he was a member of the Red Cross because he's a senile old man who lies constantly. All of that can be true. And Russell Brand, who, this one's more funny than anything, but he's been in court facing multiple allegations of rape and sexual assault. And he's been carrying the Bible with him, Diddy style. Sean Puff Daddy Combs also carried the Bible with him to court every day. Russell Brand went on the Piers Morgan show. And again, this is the worst timeline where Piers Morgan let people dunk all over Doug Wilson a few weeks ago, which was great to see. But also, I didn't want to cover Piers Morgan. And here he let Russell Brand, embarrass himself on television by not understanding how the Bible works, showing that his Christianity is in full hypocrite mode. But again, just because Tucker Carlson can criticize Trump and Piers Morgan can make fun of MAGA people doesn't mean these are good people and that they shouldn't face accountability when inevitably accountability, fingers crossed, I shouldn't say inevitably, when fingers crossed, there's accountability for all the people who created the MAGA movement and got it into office a second time. So yeah, I mean, let's zoom out here before getting into the specifics. The Bible as convenient get out of jail free card that's why the Bible's written. And there'll be people who disagree with that. And again, this piece of literature can serve more than one purpose. But the Bible's always been about maintaining power. Organized religion is about creating in-group and out-group dynamics and rewarding the in-group if you are high enough, if you are high enough up in the in-group, that reward is power, whether that's social control or tax-free wealth hoarding or both. The Bible is about protecting power. And so that's why it's become so relevant in the MAGA movement, because the MAGA movement isn't about following Christ. It's not a Christian movement, but it is a Bible movement in the sense that it worships power. And so, the identity protection that comes along with being quote unquote born again really does serve as a get out of jail free card. It's a convenient excuse for whatever I did before that wasn't me, right? And I've talked before about Trump and narcissism. I'm not a huge believer in personality disorders, so but I've used the example of the narcissist's prayer, which I don't have in front of me and I don't want to butcher, but something to the effect of, I didn't do that. And if I did, then you deserved it. Or I didn't do that. And if I did, it wasn't a big deal. And if it was, you deserved it. And there's like two lines I'm missing there, but basically it's Darvo in action, which is deny, attack, reverse victim, and offender. And so, uh, religion and being born again, serves that purpose of just protecting power. Trump, pretty explicitly using it as a flag waving moment. He could have hugged the American flag like he does, except he was in trouble for, non-consensually forcing himself on people, and so groping the flag might not be the best visual. So they went with a very heavily edited, as he tried to keep his dentures in, reading from Second Chronicles of all places. And as somebody who's raised around the Bible, and studied a lot of memory work and has read the Bible cover to cover multiple times because I was an autistic, undiagnosed, weird little religious kid. Uh, that's not one you want to be pulling from. Second Chronicles is not often quoted. Don't see it on a lot of Christmas greetings or what's Stanley mugs. I don't know what white women are drinking out of these days. I was going to say Tervis, but I don't think that's trendy anymore. Um, Second Chronicles is Old Testament, and when Christians, especially Christians who are using their faith as an identity protector, generally going to quote Jesus, which is limited to the New Testament, because that's full of grace and forgiveness, and the meek shall inherit the earth. And again, this is more of flag waving moment. This is more of a prop presentation for Christian nationalism than it is for his Trump's perceived Christianity. Trump, we know, isn't a Christian. Again, MAGA thinks he's a flawed, chosen apostle. And this, in a sense, I can certainly see where like David was a horrific abuser and sex pest. Um, and that's God's chosen. Samuel, same. Abraham, same. Like the Old Testament is rife with flawed humans being God's anointed, um, which is why they have to go to the Old Testament, because there is nothing that Jesus, who again wasn't real, mythical figure here, but the the quotations attributed to the person that could have been Jesus are all about giving money to the poor, protecting uh, those in need. He who lives by the sword dies by the sword. It's more likely that a camel will pass through the eye of a needle than a rich man will get into heaven. Jesus is pretty solid on not whatever Donald Trump is, not wealth hoarding, not gaudy, not drawing attention to yourself. They did both hang out with prostitutes, but I think in different ways where the Lord wasn't paying them, unlike Trump. So, yeah, he's got to go to the Old Testament. One, because it's a Christian nationalist movement. Like, there's nothing about this that Trump decided to do. Trump doesn't like the Bible, doesn't like Christians outside of their easy to manipulate. And again, my opinion, I'm not allowed to diagnose other people. So, not my personal opinion is that he's got real bad dementia and is pretty far gone. So he's sort of going from thing to thing. They sort of let him be on camera when he's recently gotten his medication, because he's a little bit more lucid. Trump has also famously been on uppers. I shouldn't say famously. I think this has not been a thing that's well known. He likes to talk about how he doesn't drink, but he's been on uppers for a long, long time. The amount of medication level drug use that goes on at the White House in Trump's first term was really high, like staggeringly high. And that's not even getting into like Trump Jr. or Don Jr. and Marco Rubio doing cocaine. So, it's just really hard to cover the amount of like this would end any other administration in any other time if we weren't so extreme, but we are. And so, yeah, like the griftiness is really gross, but Trump didn't pick this Bible passage, was the point I was trying to make. I'm guessing I don't know. It doesn't really matter. I don't think Mike Johnson would have picked it. I'm leaning towards Stephen Miller or Pete Hegseth. Although I don't think Pete Hegseth actually knows the Bible because, he was quoting Pulp Fiction, thinking it was from the Bible. Um, and again, it's hard to know if like they're just so cynically grifting, um, and they think people won't notice because they think everyone else must obviously be grifting, or they think everyone's that stupid, or my most likely guess is that they themselves are that stupid. Again, like this, grifters using the Bible as cover is, I don't think particularly new or interesting. Um, but Trump had to do something to circle the wagons of his Christian base because they were mad at him for posting himself as Jesus. Which he's posted himself as the Pope before, so he got into a tiff with the Pope. But again, he's posted himself as Pope before, when we needed when there was not that we've ever needed a Pope to exist at all. We could just get rid of the Catholic Church and redistribute their wealth, and that would be a boon for the entire world. Um, but when there was a gap in the papacy, Trump posted himself and like ruffled some feathers, but I don't think Catholicism is all that strong here in America. The Pope is probably a much more popular figure in other places that are still much more highly Catholic than America is. But the Pope's been outspoken about the war, not giving the Pope any flowers. He's a sexual predator protector. His entire career, he's defended pedophile priests up until being uh, the new Pope. So fuck that guy. Um, but he is against the Iran war. So, if in our modern timeline, obviously being a pedophile is not disqualifying for very many people to be in power. So if the bar is that low, then I guess being against committing war crimes is a good thing. So the Pope's at least got that compared to the other so-called religious people we're talking about today. It's just such a stupid timeline. This podcast is supposed to be about how therapists take care of their mental health, and this is not how I take care of my mental health, by reading and engaging with this nonsense. But it's distressing for a lot of people. Again, the imagery around the president in the Oval Office reading the Bible, if you have religious trauma, if you're a survivor of religious trauma, if you have trauma history, if you are suffered and survived abuse at the hands of religious leaders, or just were abused by doctrinal dogma that's harmful, this is really triggering. So that's why we're covering it. I'm not just doom and gloom and wanting to be angry on the internet. Um, so yeah, Trump picked a verse that was like really I wouldn't even say it was a dog whistle. It wasn't the apology that I thought they would go for. It was obviously just like the trappings of Trump in the White House reading the Bible. I don't know how many people even listen to him. He's hard to listen to. He isn't good at reading. We know, which is why he very rarely sticks to his teleprompter, and his briefings have to be done in pictures or videos. I think they're just putting him in a room and showing AI generated images to him to keep him happy. Um, and his dentures, I don't know. I'm not an old person. I don't know how difficult it. My grandpa wore dentures and like would do this when his dentures were getting loose or whatever. There's just a sound there of like lispiness, but also it's hard to listen to. I did make myself listen to it because I couldn't believe they picked a verse from Second Chronicles. um, but it's very coded in, if my people will recognize my power, my authority, and come to my name. And again, like it is a weird apology choice when Trump just posted himself as Jesus. And again, Trump's excuse, his lie, was, "Oh, I thought I was a member of the Red Cross." No, that's not how they dress. Again, like he's stupid and also lived a very privileged life, like silver platter privilege, right? Like he doesn't know what going to a grocery store is like. He's never had to do that in his life. He doesn't know that nurses aren't dressed as like 1940s candy stripers. And so in billowing robes like Jesus wore. And again, he doesn't know that that's what Jesus looked like. Anyway, so it's saying I thought it was a doctor healing this person who looked suspiciously like Jeffrey Epstein. Again, just a wild, wild image to post. There were like demons in the sky. The AI generation is still not great. And also, this is what a senile old man does to pass his time and then posts from his supposedly official account. We're we're so far gone from a serious country. I don't know what we're doing. Um, so the verse he picked was about power, was about coalescing, and one then I'll heal their land. If everybody does what I tell them to, that I'll heal their land. Classically loving unconditional God there. Weird choice because again, Trump reading it doesn't really undo that Trump thought of himself as Jesus. The God Emperor is a very common trope throughout history. Lots of leaders have claimed to be um, elected or chosen by God or to be gods themselves. So, again, not that I'm big on NPD, narcissistic personality disorder, but narcissistic tendencies for sure. Again, I think Trump has a bunch of trauma and he's a legitimately idiotic person. Daddy didn't love him. He's done drugs for forever. He's an awful human being who's an idiot. And the only skill he ever sort of had was doing a reality TV show, which at least teaches you some skills about what clips well on TV. And we're such a media illiterate civilization that worked to get elected. Um, so yeah, he's doing what he knows, which is like, let's go on TV and shape it because, as he thinks, his voters are uneducated and easy to manipulate. So really weird. He did say Second Chronicles and not Two Chronicles, unlike his attempted readings of Two Corinthians, which isn't how Christians read the Bible, right? Um, so again, just somebody who like doesn't know this stuff. Even his AI denial, again, either he's so dumb and living in the past because of his dementia that he thinks nurses are candy stripers, or he doesn't know what Jesus looks like. And again, I think either of those things are possible because he's not a Christian. And again, I wouldn't defend somebody who was a Christian. Joe Biden was a Christian. Joe Biden went to church, went to mass regularly throughout his presidency, throughout his vice presidency. And like, again, church attendance isn't an important factor in modern Christianity because a lot of people who want to claim to be Christian just want the identity protection that it provides, right? And so being Christian is an identifier, not necessarily a behavior. Um, it's just identity protection. And so, yeah, Trump's doing that, but then also playing into the God King fantasy. He wants to be loved again as somebody whose daddy didn't love him. Like he's just got daddy issues. He wants to be liked. That's why he ran as the pseudo populist. He wants adoration. He sees dictators who are tyrannical, like Kim Jong Un and Putin, who put on like military parades and everyone smiles and waves and looks happy because if they don't, they and their families will be executed or whatever dictators are doing these days, allegedly. I don't know. Not worried about Putin suing me, I guess. Um, which is why Trump wanted to do that, right? Is why he surrounded himself by sycophants, like Kash Patel, who comes and, glazes him whenever, and whatever, Patel's a good example and also an extreme example because he's trying not to get fired. Um, but yeah, Christians were a little miffed at Trump's AI image, and Christians were getting on board. I mean, ex evangelicals have been joking about Trump as the Antichrist. Um, since Trump 1.0, but even his evangelical base was getting on board with like, he does line up a little bit more with the Antichrist than a chosen messenger. That's problematic to our branding. So, yeah, And, like, again, Trump 1.0 was like, "Name your favorite Bible verse," and he couldn't. I think a reporter could just ask him to recite the Lord's Prayer, and he wouldn't be able to do it, and it wouldn't matter, right? Like, that wouldn't move the needle anymore, but I really wish somebody would have done it in 2015 or 2016. Um, and that gets us into, like, the performative nature here of Russell Brand. Russell Brand has been in court. I think his court date got pushed back. Interwebs can correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, I guess, but I think his court date got pushed back to like October, which is unfortunate because a lot of women have come forward with allegations of abuse, rape, statutory rape. He's publicly said he did the statutory rape. So I don't know what the court case is all about because he's admitted to that one. But a lot of other women have then come forward with allegations of sexual assault and outright rape. Those are different categories. If you're uninformed, I would say read up, but it's not like it's a pleasant read. Legally speaking, those can be two different things. Which again, reminder for anyone keeping track at home: Trump has legally been found guilty of rape. So like that's fun. Glad he's the president. But yeah, Russell Brand has been in court. Russell Brand has been taking a Bible with him to all of his court dates. Now, Russell Brand's very public, very obvious grift of converting to Christianity has been going on for a while. Like this was early 2025, if not into 2024. He converted publicly and came out as Christian before the allegations hit, but around that time. So he knew it was coming and he got onto that quick. He's talked at CPAC, he's led prayers in other places. The very obvious born again, new man, um, talking about how he was so immature in his like mid 30s before he found Christianity and being anti woke. Again, just the grift has been like shifting his tone on his podcast and his public appearances. He wrote a book about like how to be Christian in 7 days or something like that. Um, fun little creation myth numerology, I guess. I don't know. But he was on Piers Morgan. I don't know what Piers Morgan is doing. I think Piers Morgan is doing what Tucker and Candace Owens and some of the other people are doing. Marjorie Taylor Greene, trying to like, they're rats abandoning the ship. They see Trump not being popular. They don't really see a convincing pathway to maintain power through the midterms. Again, I think there was an idea and they're still going to try stuff, right? Like I'm not optimistic that we're out of the woods here, but I think they're seeing local school board election losses pile up. They're seeing judges like in Wisconsin here, the state Supreme Court went more liberal by a landslide. And so things that seemed contestable when Trump was on the ballot aren't without him. And so and probably without like Elon Musk and Peter Thiel and other people cheating. Let's be honest, right? I try not to go full blue and on conspiracy theorist about that stuff, but um anyway, so Russell Brand, so yes, those right-wing figures, rats abandoning the ship. I don't think anyone sees both the Senate and the House staying Republican. Um Certainly possible they both could turn blue. We really need new Democratic leadership because Jeffries came out on a Fox News interview. I will allow for that nuance and said impeaching Trump wasn't the top priority. Affordability was, which is like not bad messaging on Fox News if you're reaching across the aisle, but is terrible messaging to anybody who's actually on the left, which is not where the Democratic Party is. So, yeah, impeachment would be grand uh, if we get uh, both sections of Congress. Would be really cool. And then abolish the Electoral College. But that's not what we're talking about today. We're talking about Russell Brand. Russell Brand was on Piers Morgan because, again, Piers Morgan is a rat abandoning ship. And which, like, he's in the UK, but Brexit was a pretty big failure. So they've got their own stuff going on if you follow the British politics, which I only very loosely do because I like a lot of British comedians and they like to make fun of their leaders. Good for them. And our leaders too, James Acaster. Uh, had a great interview with Seth Meyers recently. and some really funny jokes about Trump and Prince Andrew being pedophiles. The Russell Brand interview on Pierce Morgan. I didn't watch the whole thing, but Pierce Morgan came back to, he tried to bring it up a couple times and Brand went away from it because Brand doesn't want to talk about actual Bible stuff. He's not a real Christian. He's just grifting. And Pierce Morgan sort of stuck with it and eventually said, what 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 did you keep having highlighted in your Bible? What verse was meaningful to you? And Brand kept mispronouncing Isaiah, and I don't know if that's because he's a bad Christian or because he's British. I've never heard somebody pronounce it that way, but it could be a Britishism. I feel like I've heard and been around people from the UK, and from just the continent of Europe who are Christians preach and teach enough from when I was a Christian that I would have heard it before. So I think it's just him being bad at pretending to be a Christian. But about 90 seconds went by, and like kudos to the Pierce Morgan. Again, I hate this timeline. Pierce Morgan is a terrible person. He's part of the reason we're here. But they just let him flounder. They didn't cut it. They didn't edit it. They just let him page and page and page, and he couldn't find the verse until he picked a random one. And that was, you know, the emperor has no clothes, right? Like, we did this with Trump and it didn't matter because the media landscape is so siloed. But like when a reporter from a different country interviewed Trump, Axios Australia reporter just let him flounder. Trump was like, here are the numbers. And the reporter's like, what numbers? And Trump handed him like childhood graphs that were printed out for him that didn't have any data on them. And the guy's like, you are an idiot. And then a bunch of idiots proceeded to elect him. So, you know, I don't know that not finding a Bible verse proves you're not a Christian. But the way he floundered does make me think, A, he didn't have a real verse picked out. And B, he doesn't actually read the Bible. He has a worn copy that looks used in the way that a well run props department could make a book look used. And as somebody who's spent time in Hollywood and, you know, rubbed elbows and made movies with other sex pests, like, sure, I don't dismiss that he could get a prop that looks well worn. He had a lot of bookmarks in that Bible, but he didn't actually cite the verse that he wanted. You would think he'd put a bookmark there. But again, as somebody who like was evangelical, the Bible's in order. You memorize the books, chapter verse. It's not a hard book to navigate. It's not even like you need to know the page numbers. You just need to know the Bible verse, and then you can find it pretty effortlessly. I've not opened a Bible in 8-9 years, and I could still do that because again, I spent a long time in the church, and you just know how to navigate the Bible. Trump would struggle with Second Chronicles because again, this is not a common one. But yeah, I mean, Trump's doing it a little bit to flag wave the white nationalists who make up the Christian nationalist wing of the MAGA movement. And like, you know, I'm not somebody who needs to split hairs between white supremacists and American Christians, but like, to reiterate, that Venn diagram is just a circle. The idea that Brand is doing this a little differently. He's not doing the flag waving thing. He doesn't need to coalesce power. It is just the very obvious get out of trouble. Look at me. I'm born again. So you can't judge me for what I did before, hoping to get let off early. And like, again, it worked for Diddy. Diddy isn't in jail for very long for the amount of heinous things that he was charged for. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know how that'll play in the UK. I don't follow or keep up with this stuff. I would think culturally, like the Jimmy Savile stuff and some of the other things in the UK, that they would be harsher on him than in America here. We still have not a functional democracy, but we still have too many judges who are political appointees and like coroners and medical examiners and a bunch of people who are political appointees who really shouldn't be. So I don't know. I don't want to be like this fell so flat that it won't work because it might. I don't think he gets off totally. I think he's said too many things that he's admitted to that were criminal, and also the allegations seem very credible. So, but again, I mean, this stuff works because not just judges, but the populace at large. We're talking about the mental health components here. Um, we like a comeback story. We like an underdog. We want, as humans, to believe that people can change. And that's compelling. That's most stories we tell, right? The protagonist has to face a problem. Sometimes it's a creation of their own problem, and they overcome it, right? The idea that people can change is compelling, and it is a shortcut to use religion because religion is based on faith and not evidence. And so you're taking the shortcut that allows you to say I'm changed without actually having to provide any evidence, which we always as a civilization should have been far more skeptical of religion. Again, holding space for people's different belief systems, I'm on board for, but the idea that we can't interrogate firmly held beliefs. And again, I understand it's tough because humanity sucks, historically speaking. That's not my personal judgment. um, because that would be misused, right? Whoever was in power, if we were judging people's sincerely held beliefs, Trump's already abusing this power, right? Trying to say that people who are anti-fascists are terrorists, which again is just outright admitting to be fascist. Um, but I understand the protection of like not interrogating that, but it also leads to like bizarro world decisions by the Supreme Court where they say, well, this is sincerely held belief by this football coach out in Washington who can have a small private prayer with his players. And then like the picture is not small and not private. It's on the 50-yard line of the football field and he makes his whole team do it. Like the by saying, "Oh, we can't ever question people's beliefs," it opens the door to a ton of bad actors. So again, in trying to protect against bad actors, we open for bad actors in the other direction. But again, what does America do? America moves in the direction of bad actors who protect power. So that that fits. And again, that's why like Russell Brand, who's not an American citizen, can speak at CPAC. That's why CPAC had like a whole thing in Hungary, which at least like Orban lost. So some hope. And all you had to do was pay us a living wage type hope. And there's I'm not again optimistic. I don't think this is like we're out of the woods because Trump posted a bad AI image. Like Trump posted a meme of the Obamas as monkeys and like nothing happened. So I really he's in the Epstein files. Like I don't know. There's not I don't know what line can get crossed anymore. I will say the media landscape, the propaganda machine pulling out support will end up mattering, and that's depressing in its own way. Not just because I have to be that cynical to be correct, but also because it's like, yeah, if these awful people had been like fascism never actually works out, we wouldn't be here in the first place. But, it's still going on. Palantir CEO just came out with a manifesto being like, what if, hear me out, eugenics. So that's not great. I don't know if there's anything else that I want to talk about this story. Oh, I mean, and again, this is old. Again, the God King fantasy is old, but like Nixon held prayer services in the White House. This is the first time a president has done the Bible in the Oval Office. Woo-hoo. As if having DoorDash delivered to the Oval Office 2 weeks ago before this doesn't diminish that. We're just, I don't know. On my YouTube channel, I have a review of Pink Floyd song Fletcher Memorial Home. If you want to check that out, like and subscribe, YouTube. Um, Gosh, I hate doing self promo, but that song talks about taking leaders, and this was during the Reagan era and Margaret Thatcher, and just like letting them do interviews on closed circuit TV to themselves. Like they could just be put in a back lot in Hollywood and be happy to play with their toys of being on camera and feeling important and not harming the rest of us instead of actually letting them have any power. And that really sticks with me as we have a senile president. And again, like America's done this before. Nixon is the example I was using for like having public prayers. Bill Clinton, in his impeachment proceedings, was photographed very obviously holding a Bible that just used as a prop. So this isn't just a Republican thing, but like certainly it's a Republican thing to take a uh, a fairly publicly amoral person like Trump or Ronald Reagan, who then is really good at TV and then gets elected as some sort of moral crusader in spite of all their obvious immoral behaviors in their past lives before they became politicians. And in Trump's case, while he was a politician, and then to have them have dementia in office, right? Ronnie needs his nap was a Nancy Reagan quote. Not great. We've done this before. Like, again, the idea that we're so media illiterate and the media is so easily bought and paid for is a problem. And I don't, again, like, this doesn't feel good. I've seen ex-evangelical people who I like and respect, and people who work in religious trauma spaces who have been like, this is the dying gasps of Christianity in America. And like, I don't think so. I'm not optimistic about that. I think this will not be Doug Wilson will not be a prominent figure in the future. I think Pete Hegseth and Mike Johnson do not have future political careers. Hegseth hopefully goes to The Hague and has to answer for war crimes. I think Christian nationalism will fall by the wayside, but in the way that white supremacy has fallen by the wayside. Again, like the KKK started out as a religious institution to keep the religious people pure and also racism. But it wasn't just racism, it was a religious organization. So the idea that like Trump is going to be what ends Christianity in America, like, nah, I don't see that at all. I think some of the branding around this, again, like decades of raping little children, again, Trump Trump fits that description, unfortunately, as well. But like the Catholic Church did not cease to exist with their very obvious, factually proven court cases. Uh, they got away with it for all intents and purposes. They move their money around and they have diocese claim bankruptcy, but they still are powerful. They're still a powerful institution that is protected and privileged in this country. So I don't see Trump flailing so blatantly to post himself as Jesus and then, read in the Oval Office poorly as the dying gasps. I see cynically this as their own cynicism and their own hypocrisy showing through. But it's not going to make people lose faith in the institution. It's going to make people slowly turn on Trump in small numbers until the media turns on him, and then in big numbers. Which is, I think we're probably close on that. I think a lot of people are probably hedging their bets to the midterms because if you're in it cynically to make a quick buck, fascism is not a bad bet. You just got to get out before you're left holding the bag. And like that sucks that's the historical precedent. And that is very much the historical precedent. But like Ford's still a company and Henry Ford was a wild anti-Semite and was pro-Hitler. So like I don't know what we're doing. I don't know why we're acting like the institutions won't circle the wagons and protect themselves. And again, that's really what Trump's reading was about, was like, to my most ardent followers, the people who want to be misled, the people who want to believe so badly that they will bury their heads in the sand and go along blindly. And that's what fascism needs. It needs loyal people like that. So ick, yuck. I'd like to be able to laugh at it, and it's just there's so much harm being done that we can't even just like laugh about it, which is a bummer. I don't know. If you want to laugh about it, go watch Fleabag season 2 and laugh at the religious trauma in it. Fleabag season 2 is a little gentle on religion, I think. A lot of the criticisms I'd say go watch Moral Oral because that's what I've been watching, but it is actually a really brutal watch after season 1, which is funny and satirical, and then it gets dark. It is dark in season 1. There's more laughs per minute. I don't know. I don't know, y'all. What am I doing for my mental health? Just as a little check-in. I mean, going to therapy still. Hooray. Shout out to my therapist. She's great. Um, yeah, I mean, I've been doing the Milwaukee Film Fest, which has been lovely. I see weird, dark movies, so I can't even recommend those as like a optimistic ending for the episode here. Um, I've seen some really good documentaries at the film fest, and the Milwaukee Film is an awesome institution, awesome organization. I don't know that they're an institution. The institution of 200-year-old theaters in Milwaukee is cool. Um, but yeah, I've seen some really good documentaries. The Maria Bamford one was exceptional. If you're unfamiliar with her work, watch her. She's a very funny person. Read her book, Sure I'll Join Your Cult. But her documentary is really good and like is hopeful, I would say. There have been some other really good ones. You Had to Be There, sort of about the if you watch Schitt's Creek, sort of those people. If you've seen A Mighty Wind or Waiting for Guffman or some of those mockumentaries from late 90s, early 2000s. I don't know. I'm dating myself here. That one was good. I didn't get a chance to see Black Zombie, but my wife saw it and said it was really good. Um, so we've been at the film fest, and that's been keeping me sane. I even went and saw a movie at 9:45 last night, which is a parent of small children. It's pretty late for me to be out. It was a miss. Sometimes you sign up and get tickets to go see the weird movies, and they're misses. Um, and sometimes they're gems. And that's why I do the film fest. So that's been my mental health. The weather in Wisconsin is up and down. It's April. That's to be expected. And also climate change is making things more extreme. But when it's been nice, I've also been back out disc golfing, which has been awesome. Last summer, I hardly went at all because my shoulder got so bad. So also like shout out to my PT who fixed my shoulder. I'm going to see my PT again because disc golf is hurting my shoulder in a way that volleyball hasn't since my shoulder got fixed. Hooray. But I've been disc golfing and taking my boys for that. That's been really fun. As May rolls around, get to garden and get out on the waterways once it's not so cold. So life is full of joy and is wonderful, even while the horrors abound. So, put your time and energy into taking care of yourself and building community so that we can vote and hold people accountable, and make real social change, not just through voting, but through applying pressure for a better society would be cool. But also, watch your weird little movies and get outside and throw some discs at some chains and do that stuff too. Life. Yeah, that's what I got. I had a whole thing in my head about calling in Jesus, but a lot of people listen to the podcast, and it's very much a visual gag being a white dude with blue eyes who happens to have long hair and a beard, so I can pull off the Jesus look pretty convincingly for what Christian nationalists want Jesus to look like. But that's a visual gag that wouldn't work so well on the podcast, and then it seemed like too much work for only half of my audience to be able to enjoy. So maybe we'll get around to doing a satirical Jesus podcast, but not this week. Yeah, take care of yourself. Take care of somebody else. We'll be back next week with another new episode. See ya.